All right, welcome to the Purple Sector podcast here. We've got a good one on show for you. The Australian Grand Prix. This is the Purple Sector podcast brought to you by the Spalding Media Network. I am your host, Chris Everidge. Max Verstappen fan, sure. McLaren fan, sure. Just a fan of Formula One. That's what I go by, you know. So at the end of the day, I think we had a good race today. We're going to go through everything. We've got your biggest surprises. We got your storylines. We got your race review, your race rating, all of that good stuff. And we're going to go through it here in this presentation style. We got a pretty solid podium here. 2 Ferrari drivers. You got Carlando, if you're a fan of Carlos Sainz and the Lando Norris brotherhood, so to say. Norris gets his podium position. Really a big thing here is the fact that this podium doesn't have Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen on it. We're going to go through that. Of course, those are the 2 drivers at this race. So, yeah, let's just go ahead and get through it. Let's start with some of the storylines. The first one I want to talk about here is this Logan Sergeant situation. I put a funny meme on here. Carlos Sainz will use Logan Sergeant's appendix, obviously, from a couple weeks back. The Carlos Sainz couldn't race because of his appendix issue. And this is a play on the joke a little bit because I personally feel, and, you know, I'm an American, I am a Sargent fan, but I'm not really a Sargent fan. Like, and he's from Florida too. Like, he's from like 4 hours where I'm at. He's from Fort Lauderdale. Might even be less than 4 hours. I'm not sure, but you know, he hasn't performed exactly to what you would have hoped. He is probably the slowest driver on the grid, but the thing that kind of rubs me the wrong way here is that Albon crashed his car, but Sargent's the one that, at the end of the day, doesn't get to race his car. Logan Sergeant did nothing wrong in the race. He did not crash his car in practice, or I shouldn't say race. Logan Sergeant did nothing wrong. He did everything that he should have. He went through the first practice, did his thing. It's just because Albon, who completely destroyed his car, Williams didn't have a backup chassis. And so James Vowles, the director of Williams, says, okay, well, we're going to put Albon in the Sargent car because he's our best chance of getting points. And in the end, it didn't work out because Albon didn't get any points. Even with the 2 retirements that would have probably finished ahead of Albon, definitely would have finished ahead of Albon, and with the Alonso penalty, and he still didn't get top 10. So it didn't work out. All you end up taking a race away from Sargent. Now he'll go a whole month without racing because we had 2 weeks in between this race and last race. We had 2 weeks in between this race and the next one. So now you're going a whole month without racing. Sargent did nothing wrong, and he gets his car taken away from him. So, like I said, I understand it from the point of view from where, you know, if you have to run one car, you'd rather run Albon's, but I just don't know, would this have happened if it was McLaren, for instance? Because I think for the most part, everybody knows that Lando is faster than Piastri, but it's not that big of a gap. Piastri has outraced Lando on multiple occasions, but at the end of the day, Lando is probably the better chance. So would that same thing would have happened that time around if it was for McLaren? I don't know. I think this is because it is a bigger gap and Sargent, but at the end of the day, I don't like it at all. Like I said, you take away Logan did nothing wrong, and he didn't get to race this weekend. And, you know, he's said it on his end with different quotes multiple times. It's the hardest thing for him in his career. And like I said, I agree. I don't like it. Puts a sour taste in my mouth. There's been, you know, if you keep up with F1 Twitter or a lot of those guys, you know, the majority of the room understand why it happened, but don't like it. And I'm the same way. I don't like it, but I understand. So let's move on. Max Verstappen, the brake fire. This happened on lap 3. So Verstappen off the line, started on pole, front row, got ahead of Sainz through the first 2 laps. Myself, along with the commentary crew, and probably a lot of other people, thought that the smoke was just dust from coming up the track. You know, it's lap 2 of the race. But then Verstappen was saying that he had lost the car in turn 7, turn 8, and what Verstappen had said, it was like driving with the e-brake on or driving with the parking brake on. So the entire time you're just completely cooking those rear tires, cooking the brakes. And that's what he said it was like. So that happened lap 2. Sainz passed him lap 3, and then his car just gave up on him. The smoke was very apparent. People thought it was an engine issue, and then he came down pit lane. His whole rear tire, like the brake duct in the rear tire, exploded out the side of the car. The car actually like jumped a little bit to the left, and so he had like a minor explosion in pit lane, and then they had to, you know, destroy the fire, get rid of the fire, and that's just what happened. Is as you can see in the photo here, that right side of the car was like melted. That rear right side of the car was completely gone. He would not have survived any longer in that race than what had happened. So it is weird how it happened. That hasn't happened on this car. Really hasn't happened that much at all. You usually see the front brakes lock up. They must have had a lot more brake pressure on the rears of the car. They had, at least what we heard from the commentary crew, was that they put more wing on the front of the car to get more downforce, less drag. What happened was you ended up cooking the rears, you overheated the brakes, and then it got to a point where it was just smoking, it was caught on fire. It was caught on fire for almost the entire lap. So is it good for, you know, F1 to kind of have this happen? Sure. You know, we saw that in 2022 where the Red Bull guys, they didn't finish Bahrain and then had issues in the second race. And Leclerc had a very clear lead until he kind of self-destructed. And in this case now, Verstappen is 25, 26 points less than what he would have had. So I think it's probably good for F1. It makes it a bit more exciting. But the race itself still wasn't that like it wasn't crazy. Like for the most part, it was the 2 Ferraris and then the 2 McLarens. The battles were kind of elsewhere on the track. So it's not like we got any better of a race. It was still a good race, but it's not like we got any better of a race with Verstappen not in it, so to say. So it is weird how it happened. I think I've covered this well, and we can move on. But it was early for that to happen. But I guess something like that would have happened early. So after that, this was scary. George Russell. Car was flipped sideways, and there are videos on TikTok and pretty much everywhere. He was screaming for a red flag because obviously we've seen this before, the Canada incident years back. George Russell was on his side, and he was begging for red flag. He's like, red flag, red flag, red flag. I'm sideways, red flag, red flag. And the stewards didn't red flag the race. Like, you have to red flag in that situation. They put a virtual safety car, not even a full course safety car. At least call a full course safety car so everybody slows down. Virtual safety car, you don't even have to slow down that much. And we saw at least I saw the audio from Lance Stroll. He was the next one coming through. His engineer was like, "Hey, you got Russell's. He's in middle of the track. Slow down. He's in the middle of the track." And Stroll barely even missed Russell. So this was really dangerous because the car was sideways. What if he got hit? I don't even want to think about that, but what if he got hit? Because it's coming out of you're coming out of the right into the left. You're coming out of that really quick. What if Stroll hit him? What if another guy hit him? Obviously, we don't want to imagine that, but Russell was really begging for that red flag. He's like, I'm in the middle of the track. I'm sideways. Red flag, and they didn't red flag the race. I think that is going to be something that the FIA and the stewards need to look at. I said I don't know who the person is that makes that decision, but they really need to figure out why they didn't red flag the race. I think if you have a car in the middle of the track, you call a safety car. If you have a car in the middle of the track that's sideways and the driver is just sitting there, like not upside down, but sideways, and they don't red flag that. I mean, that's incredible to me. And then I saw the clips about how Alonso ended up causing the issue with Russell. And yeah, Russell had been catching up to Alonso for the last 10 laps of the race. He was always within a second in the DRS range. And then, of course, the cameras were watching the 4 laps where the crash didn't happen, and then they switched off when it did happen. But these guys were racing, and then Alonso had a throttle issue, and he slowed down in a spot that Russell didn't expect, and then he snapped. He was turning through, and then he snapped. And that is why Alonso ended up getting a 20-second penalty, which dropped him a few positions. I haven't seen any interview from Alonso on whether or not he kind of accepted the penalty, but I do know that he was asking if Russell was okay and such. But it was just scary. I think you have to red flag that. I'm interested to see what you guys have to say. I think it should have been red flagged for sure. Otherwise, Russell was doing all right. He was doing better than Hamilton was for the majority of the race. He was battling for 5th, I believe. It might have been 6th. I'm pretty sure it was 5th. It was 6th because Perez finished 5th. Battling for 6th, and that's still not exactly where Russell wants to be, but it looked like he was probably potentially going to get by, especially with Alonso having the throttle issue. But it's just scary at the end of the day because Russell's sideways on the track. That car is destroyed, and there are other cars just driving around at not even half speed, above half speed. And after Stroll had gone by, yes, the other cars were slower. They did see that, but at least Stroll didn't. I don't know if Stroll saw it. I think he was relying on his race engineer, and if that message didn't get through, it could have been scary. This is just a funny one I threw in there. Gunther Steiner doing the post-race interviews. So I actually saw, the normal way to be a post-race interviewer is, you become a journalist, you become a presenter, and then you become an interviewer. Or you become a world champion like Rosberg, or you become like a reserve driver, or you become a team principal, and then you get fired from your job. You're pretty popular on Netflix, so they get you to do the post-race interview. I thought it was pretty funny. I didn't watch it all, but a little hilarious that Gunther Steiner was the post-race interviewer. And I think he did pretty good. So let's move on. Here are your top 10. Let's go through it. So, yeah, Sainz and Leclerc. Really, the Ferraris were in a race of their own throughout the majority of the middle of the race. They were told to hold. Could Leclerc have potentially caught up to Sainz in the middle of the race? We'll never know. That wasn't the strategy. Sainz was always on 5-lap fresher tires. He had always did the overcut on Leclerc. It was a masterclass of a race by Sainz. He took advantage to get by Verstappen, and then Verstappen was out of the race. And then at that point, it was just his race. He didn't not lead a lap, especially because he did the overcut. So he led every lap except the first. He was losing a bit of time there towards the end, but he still would have won even if the Russell situation didn't happen. Leclerc comes home second. He'll probably think he could have got more out of this race. If it's a Ferrari 1-2, you would usually think Leclerc and Sainz, but I think Sainz is kind of switching that. Really, he has. Sainz outperformed Leclerc in the first year. And then Leclerc outperformed him last year. Like I said, Sainz currently doesn't have a job. I think, obviously, the Hamilton is a good thing for Ferrari. But also, like, Hamilton's kind of not having a fantastic last couple seasons. Like, he's being outclassed by Russell. And I'm going to throw it out there. Is Hamilton better than Sainz at this current moment? I think the car has a lot to do with it if they were in the same car. And, of course, we'll see that next year. Because that'll be the year before the regulations change. But at this current moment, I think Sainz is probably the better driver, and he's showing that by winning this race. Got a podium in Bahrain as well. Lando got third. It was a battle between Lando and Piastri for a majority until the drivers switched. Lando was on the same situation as Sainz, a strategy that gave him fresher tires. And they did a driver swap, and then from there it wasn't anywhere close. Lando. It was actually two Leclerc, as we could see here, and the time intervals. These time intervals are quite skewed because of the last part of the race. So that's your Perez, 5th. Kind of shocking. Given the car, given the track, it's sort of a street circuit. The Perez street circuits, you really would have thought Perez would have done better than a 5th place here. Everybody went for the 2-stop, so there wasn't really much of a strategy. It was mostly medium, hard, unless you were Hamilton, who started on the softs, but obviously didn't finish the race. So it was a medium, hard for the majority of everybody. And Perez, at this point, it was just, hey, let's use the car. Other drivers were saying his car's a rocket ship, but he still couldn't get past either McLaren or even challenge the Ferrari. So bit concerning once again. Like I said, we're in a weird spot where it's like Perez is probably better than Yuki, better than Ricardo, but it's better than Sainz. Can you see Sainz? I would hope so. I want to see Sainz go to Red Bull next year. I don't know if it'll happen. Like I said, Verstappen might not even be at Red Bull next year, but yeah, 5th place for Perez. I believe this is the incorrect result with Alonso. Alonso is 8th, actually. So Stroll moves up into 7th. Pretty good race. He had a good week. Qualified Alonso in Q3. So he ends up getting 6th. Yuki ends up getting 7th, which is really good for Visa Cash App Red Bull. Yuki was always ahead of Ricardo's entire week, and Yuki got into Q3, and he finishes in the points. He'll get 6 points. And then Alonso got 8th. So not a great weekend for Aston Martin. They get double points, but it could have been better. It could have been 6th and 7th. It's 6th and 8th. So they actually lose 2 points. And then a double points finish for Haas. Didn't think Magnus would get it, but he did because of the Russell crash. And that's where I was pointing back earlier with Albon. Albon got beat by both Magnussen and Hülkenberg. So it didn't work out. I should have let Sargent keep the car. So that's your classified drivers. Let's go to the non-points. You got Albon. You got Ricciardo, who did recover nicely. I believe he started 18th or 17th. Ends up finishing 12th. But in terms of the on-track, that would have been 15th, right? Because he had 3 retirees. Gasly looked pretty good today for Alpine. Was in the points at a moment due to the strategy. Ends up finishing 13th. Somehow, Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu both finish ahead of Ocon when they both had pit stop issues and slow. Sauber don't look great. Neither do Alpine. Gasly looked solid, though, today. And then, of course, Russell, Hamilton, Verstappen, your non-classified drivers. All right, biggest disappointment, I'm going to say it. It's Lewis Hamilton. He's had a rough year. Now, I know he's going to Ferrari next year. That's going to be part of his, part of in his mind a little bit. But still, just has not been a great driver compared to Russell at all 3 races. Didn't even make Q3, and then ends up, retiring due to an engine failure. But was he even going to score points? I mean, who even knows if he was going to score points? He was not putting any sort of pace out there. I think he definitely would have scored points. He would have finished ahead of the Haas drivers, but you're still looking at probably like an 8th place. And that's just not good enough for Mercedes. That's just not good enough for Hamilton. And if he has like a really rough year where he's going to finish in the standings in like 7th, which could easily happen. Both Red Bulls are going to finish ahead of him. Both Ferraris are going to finish ahead of him. There's more than likely both McLarens are going to finish ahead of them. So you're looking at 7th or 8th, where at this point I think Russell will finish ahead of him. So they're looking at 8th, but you also got Alonso, who for the most part is getting better results than Hamilton. It's like, is Hamilton even going to get, like at this point, Hamilton's probably ninth place in the driver's standings as a prediction for me. Obviously, I think, we see different changes, like McLaren really turned it on at a point last year, with Alpine ended up turning it on, but they won't get to the point where they're at Mercedes. But it's been real rough. And the biggest disappointment from this race is Hamilton, not only because of his, not even finishing the race, but he just wasn't anywhere in qualifying, wasn't anywhere in practice. I think I saw a thing that said it was almost like he was just dragging the car around to get a fastest lap in, to get a good lap in. He was using everything he had to get a decent lap in. That wasn't even good enough. I said, didn't even make Q3. So he's my biggest disappointment. Lewis Hamilton is. So let's move on to the biggest surprise, and it's the American team. American team, sure, that's what we'll call it. It's a double points position for Haas. Hulkenberg got points last race. He might have got them in Bahrain, did he? I don't remember, but he got points. And it wasn't only that Hulkenberg got 2 points, K-Mag got a point. And I said it was only because of Russell crashing out. Otherwise, they would have finished 10th and 11th. But still, double points for Haas. They're like in the driver's seat right now to finish 6th. The best, you got Formula 1 and then Formula 1.5. With Formula 1 being McLaren, Red Bull, Mercedes, Aston Martin, and Ferrari. And then the rest are Formula 1.5. That's what they call it. And right now, it's led by these guys. Back-to-back points. They got, 4 on the year now? So all I'm going to say is they're getting better, they're doing good, and they are my biggest surprise. And we'll say this, what's wrong with Lewis Hamilton? Talked about it for a majority of the part. Like I said, I think what's wrong with Hamilton, what's wrong with Mercedes? My biggest disappointment was mostly Hamilton, but it was also for Mercedes. And that previous slide, I should have mentioned that I was meaning to say like Mercedes in general, but specifically Lewis Hamilton. But I said, you just throw on the fact that Russell was battling for 6, which I guess is okay, but it's not where Mercedes want to be. And then they don't, both drivers DNF. And then, like I said, more specifically with Hamilton, he's just not been there for a majority of the season. He wasn't there today, and that's just surprising. All right, team of the week is Ferrari this week. I'm not going to disagree with anybody that says team of the week was McLaren either. McLaren a 3rd and a 4th. I think you're really happy if you're McLaren right now, but you're definitely happy if you are Ferrari. You lock up fastest lap, you lock up the race win, so you've got yourself, what is that, 25 plus 19, you got yourself a lot of points, 46 I think. That's a lot of points from one race. That should boost Ferrari up. I haven't seen the driver standings yet. I might look at them at some point. Doesn't really matter this early in the season, but it's a big points haul for Ferrari to get a 1st and a 2nd and a fastest lap. That's what Red Bull did so much the last 2 years. That's what Mercedes did so much for the 4 years in a row that they won the championship. Is just getting 1-2s and fastest laps. And that's exactly what Ferrari did here today. Getting a 1-2, getting the fastest lap. Like I said, we don't know if Leclerc had enough speed, if he was on a different strategy maybe, but he kind of just ended up following Sainz around the whole race. And it was the smooth operator that won. But yeah, you get a double podium, you get the win, you get the maximum amount of points. I said I won't deny anybody that says McLaren either because it's 3rd and 4th. You started on the 2nd and 3rd row, and you finished both drivers 3rd and 4th. So really good there. My race rating is a 7 out of 10. So the only reason I say that, I think it's a better race because it wasn't just dominated by Verstappen. It was also a decent race because we saw quite a few DNFs. Like I said, with Verstappen going out, that added this is a race between Ferrari and McLaren and Checo. And then Hamilton goes out. But then I said it kind of got dull in the middle. If we would have saw a battle between Leclerc and Sainz, or even Lando and Leclerc, I think this would be an 8 or a 9. But we didn't see anything. Lando got by Piastri when they told them to switch. And then we never saw anything between Leclerc and Sainz. Leclerc's always had pit earlier, was often in 4th, and then once things cycled back around again, it was in 2nd. I don't know if we didn't really get robbed of a good finish due to that crash, because I don't think Sainz was going to end up giving up a 2.5-second lead in one lap. But race rating, 7 out of 10. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And closing thoughts, I think things are really interesting now as we head to Japan next. We go to Asia, we go to Japan, and we go to China before coming back to Miami. So, yeah. Ferrari got a big boost today. Verstappen out very early. He was potentially going to get a 10-race win streak again. He did 11 last year before Sainz broke it up, and Sainz breaks it up again. Sainz is just a guy that breaks up everything that's good for his former teammate when they were at Toro Rosso. So, like I said, race rating for me was a 7. What do you guys think of this race? Are you happy about the podium? What do you guys think about Mercedes in general? Who are some of your biggest surprises? Like, good week for Gasly, good week for Stroll, real good week for Haas. Bad week, though, for Sauber. Bad week for Mercedes. And really bad week for Mercedes. And even Red Bull had a bad week with Perez not getting any better than 5th place. And then a DNF. So they got 10 points out of the weekend. So just not good enough. But yeah, that was this episode. The Australian Grand Prix from Down Under. This is the Purple Sector Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Everidge, on the Spalding Media Network. Make sure you catch up with us in 2 weeks for a race recap of the Japanese Grand Prix. I'll see you guys.